can see that.
Agenda page.
Nothing showing yet, George, but it does act delay.
And now you can get all the background.
Minute delay or so.
Yeah, it is. I'm trying to think of what other one would be.
Okay, I see a picture on talking.
Sample one, is that a little bit more?
There you go.
Because I'm thinking.
We're good, I can hear Roberta.
On recording.
Okay, it's close enough. So welcome to the regular special meeting of the Durham Planning Board on the 15th of January 2024. We will start with a roll call and determination of quorum. We have our five regular members here, so we have a quorum. Next step is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any amendments to the agenda? I don't really have, the only thing I will, at the end of the meeting, we just need to talk about future meetings. So, seeing none, no amendments. Continuing business, there's none. New business, there's none. Other business is, I guess, the discussion on battery energy storage system regulations. And we're going to start with public comment period. And so, for those of you here, first off, if you've got a cell phone on, please silence it or turn it down. I actually remember to do that this meeting, but please go ahead and do that. Secondly, public comment is on battery energy storage tonight. So when you come up, grab a seat with the microphone with the little red arrows that are on there, state your name and address, and we will and then ask any questions, comments. It's not a discussion at this point, so if you have a question or we have something, we'll stop the public comment period and then discuss it, and we may, if you're welcome to stay, and we may discuss your comments. So in addition to whoever speaks tonight, we have 3 people who have emailed us questions. We'll discuss that as well. So they've been on our website, and so you may have had a chance to look at those. So public comment, does anybody here from the public who would like to comment? Okay. Step to the plate, speak into the microphone loudly, clearly, name and address.
Okay, Stephen Brzezinski, 52 Quaker Ridge Road in Durham. Don't have a lot. Doing some research, looking over the NFPA guidelines for the site and stuff, and a little research on batteries. I don't really have a big problem with this, but I do have several concerns. One is that found some interesting information regarding batteries. Was reviewing an NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board study of comparing electric vehicles versus gasoline and diesel powered vehicles. And I was surprised to find out that a gasoline powered vehicle is like almost 70 times more likely to catch fire and burn than an electric vehicle. If you look at the news, you think it'd be the other way around. But electric vehicles apparently are much safer than the news portrays them. It's because there's so few of them, one catches fire, it's like, ooh, big news. So that made me feel more comfortable. And that's not a percentage, that's like if you take 1,000 vehicles, you know, you're gonna have one electric catches fire for, you know, compared to 70 gasoline and diesel powered vehicles. Regarding the siting, I'm concerned about training of the fire department. If one does catches fire, it's a big mess because it's hard to put out. They're much less likely to catch fire than, say, an oil bulk plant, but if they do catch fire, they're a real big problem. And I'd love to see the facility owner be required to have proper firefighting gear and chemicals. I mean, you can't just throw water on it. And make sure they train the fire department, so the fire department also knows what to do and where the materials are and stuff. Because obviously the fire department will be there in 20 minutes, you know, where the facility owner could take an hour or two or more. So I think that's my comments. Any questions you have of me?
We'll get to those when we're finished, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much, appreciate you being brief and succinct. And for those listening at home, this has nothing to do with, electric car vehicles.
Right, I'm just,
Okay.
it's more talking about the batteries.
I got you. Next, anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close.
Hi, Mike Friendly, Runaround Pond Road. My only question is on page 1, the 5.7.2 applicability. You list different types of batteries, and they all have the threshold where they're going to be subject to this ordinance, they're all different. And I guess I wanted some explanation as to why, a sodium nickel chloride greater than 20 kilowatts, whereas, a lead battery is 70 kilowatts. I mean, it doesn't seem to be dependent on the safety factor. So I was curious what the rationale for the differences were. And I also think that, for example, the lithium ion battery with a capacity greater than 30 kilowatts is too low. A typical home battery is 15, 16 kilowatts, and if that will only supply maybe half a day's energy for a typical house uses about 30 kilowatts a day. So if people can afford it, they're going to want several batteries, which will put them over the 30 kilowatt, and then they'll be subject to this BESS ordinance, which I don't think is really the goal of this. So I would like to see those numbers raised, maybe all to 60, 70 kilowatts, whatever the number seems more reasonable. But overall, I was obviously a lot of hard work went into this, and it's well thought out.
Okay. Next. Thank you.
Hi, Roberta Brzezinski, Quaker Ridge Road. This is a brief thing, and I went over that too, and there is a lot of work put into that. I appreciate it. This is a little bit in the weeds, but when it got to the part about snow removal, I was envisioning in my head, what if it's a really bad storm? First of all, are they gonna be responsible? Are they gonna get there in time? And who's gonna be afterwards making sure that the snow was removed? Because you could potentially not get in a fence if we really got a bad storm. So just kind of following through on that stuff. Should it be Public Works checking, right away to make sure the snow got removed? And would they even be able to do it fast enough? So in the weeds a little bit, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Okay, Chief, I'm not forgetting it. Well, you're not public, so.
Here for you, here for you, sir.
Thank you very kindly. So we will close public comments and kind of go through some of the comments that these folks made. And I'll start by saying thank you for your comments on the hard work. I will credit George for the lion's share of that, but also some town staff folks as well as the members of the planning board to put this thing together. So comments that I heard is that the point made that their electric cars, batteries are not as dangerous as maybe the news has made them out to be. So that was a comment. I'm not sure we need a response. And then the other comment was for the fire department to receive training and equipment that is necessary. So, George, I seem to remember we covered that. Is that not in here?
Yeah, in addition to the references to all of the fire safety codes, every project will be required to have an emergency response plan, which is coordinated with the local fire department. And so that pretty much spells out what training and other aspects of it would be required. So I think the draft of the ordinance adequately addresses that. And the other point I would make, which kind of leads over to the comment about the different types of batteries, is that over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been an intense amount of scrutiny of these types of facilities and the technologies involved in them. As you will recall, we kind of started this process looking at the New York Interagency Task Force report, which laid out in very great detail all of the issues with these types of facilities and the fires that have been experienced, and also identifying the weaknesses in the local review systems and regulatory systems, and made a series of recommendations. This particular model that we used, which is an ordinance in Carver, Massachusetts, Massachusetts, like New York, has been doing a lot of intense analysis and trying to address the safety issues. And so this, of all the ordinances that I looked at, and we now, under the new digital codification of the ordinance, have access to thousands of ordinances. And of the ones that I looked at, the initial response of communities across the country on these was pretty much written by the industry in terms of what their needs were, and through that experience of other aspects of these facilities causing serious safety hazards and issues. Now the government has kind of weighed in and counterbalanced that to place a lot more emphasis on the not just making them acceptable within the community from a political standpoint, but also making them acceptable from the standpoint of impacts on the community, particularly with safety and environmental issues. So this ordinance, and the other point I would make is that we discussed early on, the town does not have any budget for hiring a consultant to put this together. So we pretty much did this without the needed expertise to address some of these issues. However, just based on the research that we did, my understanding of the difference in the capacities of these different batteries is because some of them are more susceptible to fire hazard than others. And so the idea is to limit the potential for what they call thermal runaway. So I think if there is a reason, that's probably it. But again, I'm not qualified to give an expert explanation of what the difference is between nickel-based having 70 kilowatt-hour capacity and lithium-ion. Lithium-ion is, from what I understand, kind of the vast majority of systems going in the country. And I think that the limitation on those is because of the potential for thermal runaway of those. And again, in the current draft, reflecting the upgraded standards for all aspects of these installations, so the connections to the grid, the overall units that are put into the facility, there's codes on that, and there are codes on the batteries that are used, the monitoring systems, the fire suppression systems, the automatic shutdown systems. There are UL codes, and all of the other codes through this ordinance reflect, to my knowledge, the latest methods of regulating these things and making sure that they're safe to operate.
Okay, thank you. Couple of things. Is there anything else anybody else wants to add on that?
No, I'll go after you.
Okay, I guess I'm on that comment. We're gonna ask Chief to come up and do that. I do wanna make sure, because I think the point that Michael made was reference car batteries. And, you know, we ran into this with solar, and I can't remember the number, so forgive me, but we said 20, and that was, we ended up changing in the final stages because we didn't think that was enough. So what I would like to do is be comfortable as a board that 70 for this system is enough for And I think we need to differentiate between home use for, recharging your car or your car's battery, excuse me, versus the big system that's a commercial or other use. So as we have our discussion, I'd like to make sure we do that. The other piece, and then we'll bring Chief up and kind of finish this up. The other issue that was brought up on training, and we'll probably go into that more in detail, is that an additional part of this, or I don't know what the right term, but is in support of this, is the town is looking at something called contract zoning. And we'll talk about what that is. But what contract zoning does allow us to do is say what kind of training, we need training based upon what the chief says, and you being developer, you're gonna have to provide that. Initially, annually, quarterly, whatever the chief thinks is the right amount of that. So we'll go into a little bit more detail. So I think to your specific point, that's something that'll come in an additional document, this part of this. So other comments on what the folks said?
I'd like to keep talking about the size of batteries. I was doing a little bit of research. Some other states are setting it based on the size of the battery, and not listing out the different types of technology, just saying, some are as high as 700, but just setting the bar at the size. If we want to list the technology, things are changing all the time. We're going to miss stuff. We're going to say things that are accurate now, but they're not going to be accurate next year. There's going to be a lot of things that we don't catch. Things that might look safe now, they might have things added to them in the future that make them not safe in the future. I would really kind of urge us to go size-wise versus technology, and maybe even scrap what we have in here regarding technology. But as far as the size goes, if what we're trying to do is avoid, anybody at their home trying to put a battery in for their residential use. If that's what we're trying to do, then why don't we just say, everything above and beyond residential use? If something simple like that versus a size, because you're right, like depending on the size of your house, you might need 100, and that just might be for residential.
Yeah.
Like if we could just limit it to residential somehow with a word, not home-based business, because that could get bigger, but just residential, maybe? Just a suggestion.
Can I respond to that? Because tier 1, by definition in this, is a battery energy storage system having an aggregate energy capacity less than half of a megawatt. If in a room or a closed area consists of only a single energy storage system technology. And then section 5.7.4 says tier 1 battery energy systems, again that's half a megawatt, are allowed by right in all zoning districts subject to applicable provisions of the main codes. So the intent of this is not to regulate in-home systems at all.
So let's talk about that for a second. So we're saying tier 1 is 500 or half a megawatt
Yep, 500
and less.
kilowatt hours
And then you're saying tier 1,
is permitted by right, just subject to the building and energy codes.
And site plan review, last sentence.
And it's subject, okay, you're right.
yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay. Because if it was less than 500, then,
And I think the intent of that is that if you're doing a site plan review, you might have a business with one of these, and that's just part of the site plan review process along with all the other utilities. I don't think that this is saying you have to get site plan review, because if you go to Article 8, this would not trigger site plan review putting in one of these. It's construction of a building or parking.
Other comments on that discussion? I'll hold mine temporarily.
Okay, sure. I'll add to that. So if I already have a solar panel system on my house, and I wanna add a battery storage system for my own personal use, I have to come to the board for that?
No. Not unless it's over 500 kilowatt hours, half a megawatt.
Well, no, I thought we just said,
It's subject to site,
Okay, if you look at what is required for site plan review applies to non-residential development, where you're doing building construction, or you're adding parking over 2,500 square feet. That's the only triggers. And then I think we added the solar farms as part of site plan review as well. So this does not apply in any way, shape, or form to individual residential properties.
I'm not sure that's clear though. I think that's, because if it is in fact lithium, let's just say you're using lithium, if you have a capacity greater than 30 kilowatts here, you come over then and say tier one, or lost that page again. A tier one is defined to have an aggregate energy capacity less than half a megawatt, which 30 kilowatts is. So that becomes tier one, then you go over to 5.7.4, but it says tier one to be is you gotta do the site plan. So I've got my car batteries and it's 70 kilowatts. And it is under the half a megawatt, and which makes it tier one. Then I come over to the next paragraph and it says, because it's tier one, I have to do a site plan review. That's the
Okay.
way I'm translating.
Yep, so I think the solution is to just strike the words subject to site plan review. To site plan review, and just be what other parts of the ordinance are applicable. Because I
Okay.
agree, that does create some confusion, those words in there.
okay,
thank you.
Good.
yeah. And can we think of anything else that they would have to follow in the ordinance? I can't.
And just to clarify, my understanding is that section 5.7.2, when it's talking about these different batteries, I
Yeah.
think it's talking about the batteries in one of these installations.
Yes, yes, it is. And why, I don't understand the benefit of listing all that out. We're saying that BESS are subject to this ordinance only if they exceed the following capacities. And then we list 5 or 6 different types of capacity and sizes.
Yeah, I think the intent is probably to exempt these if they're less than these limits, such as in-home installations.
Right, but we just talked about tier one now being pretty much exempt if you're less than 500, right?
Yeah.
Exempt as in you still have
Yes,
to follow all
but,
the
so
codes,
it's two things,
but-
it's to not include things that you don't want to include, such as residential systems, but it's also to limit lithium-ion batteries for safety purposes, would be my understanding of it. Now, whether you need that or not, I'm not sure.
Other thoughts, comments on this?
Just a matter of process, Chairman. Are we going by each public's comments?
We will eventually, yes, I mean, that's what we're kind of,
I
and
don't
we
want to
can,
get lost with all these different comments. I want to.
okay, that is a good point, so.
Yeah,
maybe-
this comment, he did bring up, so this is definitely.
I was trying to respond to comments at this point, we can hold that up. This might be a good, so I think we need to discuss this one further, so give it some thought. Chief, you wanna come up here and give us your thoughts, concerns, praise for what a great document it is?
I think that's been covered, sir. I'd like to thank certainly George for the research, sending all the paperwork my way, keeping me in the loop of your progress, all of it. So that's just a team effort on the town's part, it really is, and should be noted. I happen to have a call into the fire chief in Carver. I know him. I've worked down there. Their department, as I said before, mimics ours, volunteer fire department, agricultural, small towns spread out, limited resources, limited water. So they've thought of a lot of things. So we shouldn't reinvent the wheel, but if I have any other questions, I'll certainly bring it to you.
Okay.
I just have one after reviewing all of it, and it's on the sort of the one proposed language for emergency access. If you have that one, it's a one page front and back. On
Can you
the,
please refer to the section here?
I see that's just it. They're not sections on this page, George, the one you gave me.
Yeah.
You're talking about the access driveway shall be,
I think what I provided the chief with was a summary of a
Okay.
report identifying what the issues are for local responders.
Sure.
In dealing with these.
oh, okay. I don't think we have that.
That's okay, so I can go through George with it. There was just one, maybe a concern of mine. So we've gone over coordination with the local fire department, so training yearly, equipping the fire department, so if they have a gas monitor, we should have a gas monitor if it's specific, whether that would be carbon monoxide or hydrogen sulfide. If they have specific monitoring for gases, then we should have that also. It talks about the road width, it talks about, the grade, the weight limit, access, gating, monitoring 24 hours. Everything is doable for the fire department except the one, a fire hydrant or alternative water supply, such as a static water tank, shall be located within 500 feet of the compound. So we would need multiple dry hydrants, if you will, if that's what they choose, one on each corner, due to the prevailing winds, right? So if we arrive and the winds are at us, we can't get to the hydrant. So you'd have to have one on the opposite side. And the only other concern is 500 feet is kind of far for us, because that could be open to interpretation. Where do you start measuring the 500 feet? Is that at the gate? Is that at the border? Is that at the hydrant? You know what I mean? Is it the center of the development? So we just need to review the finites for the fire department. 500 feet, we're only carrying 1,000 on each pumper supply line. So if we were 500 feet in and then had to take a left rudder to go down one of the aisles, we could be very close to out of hose. So if we button that up to 200 or 300 feet, that would give us some accessibility. Just for the 500 feet, but certainly two forms of water supply would help. And again, we've seen around here with dry hydrants, a snowplow hits it, it cracks it, and then it's out of service. So you always want a backup. Or redundancy, if you will, for that. Otherwise, talking with other fire chiefs in the area, everything is applicable. So the NFPA standards, there's the electrical code, the 70 that citizens brought up, 855 for battery storage. George has identified all of them that are applicable to a battery storage site. I've reviewed them all, and that should suffice for the fire protection. We can get into the dynamics of the water. Certainly they will have to provide an emergency response plan, and as I've said before, that could be let it burn. We just need it in writing from them, right? Mm-hmm. Like if one pod is burning, let it burn. Protect the exposures. Or it may say copious amounts of water, drown it. Okay, but you'll have to provide copious amounts of water. So depending on what their emergency response plan says, they may get into fancy fire suppression. So, carbon dioxide, CO2, they may have total flooding in those pods. They may have a halon type of system which excludes the oxygen. Their choice. But they'll have to provide, the monitoring for that, the meters for us, that type of thing.
Okay. I have a concern.
Sure.
In general, Chief is referencing things that I don't think are in our ordinance. Because there's nothing, he's talking about we need 2 or whatever. Maybe I don't see that in here. And the 500 feet I don't see in here. It's on the list of things to consider, but he's recommending, which is good, recommending these are the things I'd like to see. But are there other things on that list that are not in here?
Where is that from?
George gave me the highlights.
I think
for
it's
fire
things to
suppression.
consider for
And
fire.
again, that's not this ordinance, that is a guideline provided by the NFPA for
I gotcha.
local fire departments.
I guess my thought would be, are there things that are in that guidance that are not in the ordinance? Two of them right off the top of my head are
Sure.
multiple water
Yep.
tanks
Yep.
and the 200 versus and 300 foot
Yep.
distance versus other things, chief. I mean, you're saying the other things are good, but they're not necessarily in the ordinance.
Correct. However, as you know, I was part of the listening group of contract zoning. That would provide other avenues for us, unless you're trying to button up specifics to Battery.
I don't know that we're trying to cover the highlights,
Sure.
I guess. But
Sure.
so if there's, at some point in time, I think we don't want to miss the fact that, hey, you got to have multiple water tanks. You know what I'm saying? So we get into contract zoning 5 years from now, you know, is there something, should we put it in the ordinance? Should we, you know, there's got to be something that, as we're going through contract zoning, that is a flashing light, you all will be here, but I may not be. So.
We're talking about BESS right now. We're not
Yes,
talking about contract zoning.
I understand, but what Chief's point is it doesn't have to be in here, but it has to be covered. My concern is, well, yes, we'll get to contract, but contract zoning doesn't say anything, you know, about these are the things that must be. And contract zoning could cover lead smelting, rocket launch, whatever it may be, right? Is if there's something that we should be in there, it should be in there. So I think and we'll talk about, I agree with you, but should it be in the ordinance now? Is it important enough? I mean, we've got all this other stuff about the width of the road and other stuff. Is there something in there that should be included now in the best ordinance?
I heard you discuss earlier sort of the vagueness is better residential commercial type thing. You could put, you know, water suppression compensatory to fuel load, to fire chief satisfaction, you know, less is more, the language, especially, and again, I heed to some of the experts, but, you know, compensatory to fuel load. So that can be argued all day long about how many gallons of water you would need to provide at that time.
I think we should look to F and G in here, and I like where you were going with that, 855, that's where it's pointed out, is that. Yeah, like it's almost like every project is project specific, right?
Yes.
They prepare a plan for us to look at and review with the fire chief, and if it's not up to snuff, it's not up to snuff.
Can you just, what's F and G?
Okay, can
What are you talking
I think
about?
there's an more applicable,
Okay.
and that is section 5.7.6 K, emergency operation plan. If you look on the next page, 1 through 8, provide the fire emergency procedures and components, and I think that's the place to put it.
For sure, yeah, sorry, I didn't go, that's right there.
Yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah,
And
and
the
I
F and G
do,
were
Yeah.
also the same.
and this does not address water supply. And the other point I would make is that we keep bringing up contract zoning as able to cover other things like what we're talking about, and we don't need to worry about it here. My premise in going forward with this is that this needs to be a standalone.
Yeah, in case.
In case contract zoning doesn't pass.
Agreed,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Now,
not-
contract zoning will add to that, but, and as a matter of fact, in some of that, as we heard from the town attorney at last night's meeting, there could be modifications to this as part of the contract zone, but that has to go to town meeting and be approved. So you get,
Right.
nothing.
We'll want something solid to look at too.
Yeah.
Even through contract zoning.
Correct.
So agree, this should be solid.
Yes, so if contract zoning doesn't happen, you still need these standards.
I guess, I don't think we can list everything in here. It's almost like maybe list as much as we can, as much as we want, and then have something in there that says, you know, we'll look at these project specific. If we need anything else, we'll go back to the applicant and ask for more. Say it better than that. But.
And I think what George's comment was, that list is out of NFPA 855, whatever it is. Thank you. And so I think we just need to make sure that in FGK, the fire chief actually gets to approve that. And whether it's as part of this process, or if it's already written in a national standard, and the chief's gonna review it, we're gonna review it per that national standard, you're right, I don't think we need to list it, that's a good point. And so, do we have strong enough words in that paragraph that George just mentioned, an emergency operation plan compliant with NFPA A55 is required? So,
So Chief, are you okay with that, or do you think it should go beyond that to say, and as approved by the fire chief?
Well, number 7, as you referenced, other procedures as determined necessary by the town, that would also include myself, to provide for the safety of occupants, neighboring properties, emergency responders. So that's sort of that umbrella by the town or the fire chief or codes.
where are you at?
Number 7.
Number 7.
That he referenced, the 1 through
The
8.
K7, we're looking at the specifics for
Yep.
emergency operation plan.
Okay,
So number 7 just says, other procedures as determined necessary.
okay.
I
That,
think sometimes, and I know Codes likes verbatim, right? He likes sort of not to have to interpret, not to have to give an opinion, read it, look at it, done. But for the fire department, other procedures as determined necessary. Water supply, two dry hydrants, maybe multiple sources of water, for the protection of the occupants, neighboring properties, and emergency responders. So, I'm not sure, not legal, and we do have a legal team, but I'm fairly certain we could argue.
But I do think it'd be important to put in the provisions that you talked about with the hydrants,
Okay.
the distance as well as the multiple
We call it
sources.
redundancy
Yep.
and they'll understand, I'm sure they have the same, with such a large
Yep.
footprint, I assume. They'll understand that, if one is cracked, and in cities and towns, hydrants are spaced about 500 feet anyways. So that if one is out, your whole pumper truck with 1,000 feet can get to another one, bypass the one that's frozen, or just wrecked by a car, out of service, that type of thing. So it's redundancy of the water supply.
because the way this reads, and I'm not trying to be too micromanaged, it said emergency operating plan compliant with NFPA 855. 855 doesn't say, I guess it says 500 feet. What you're saying is it should be 200 or 300 feet, and there should be, multiple storage tanks. Is there a storage capacity?
Yes, but 855 is all encompassing. I'm not sure you have it all. That's for fire suppression, I believe, and water distribution of a battery energy storage.
I got you.
But then compensatory to local needs. And that could be a hydrant system, city fire hydrant system, and that's not what we have.
I got you. I guess what I'm saying is if it's not in 855 and I'm a developer, I'm gonna say, we're not doing contract zoning. Where do you require me to have multiple water sources?
Sure.
Where do you?
Under other procedures as determined necessary by the town to provide for the safety of occupants, neighboring properties, or emergency responders. So I'm the town, and emergency responders, I want more than one hydrant, because if the prevailing winds are at us,
Gotcha.
then I'd like to go
It's
to the
covered.
back of the property,
I
yep.
got you.
We're not gonna specifically say it in here, but it is up to the fire chief in town to review this and provide it.
I got you. I'm good.
I
I'm good with
think
it.
we should specifically say it, not just, are we commenting now? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, if we add specific
That's out of control,
provisions for
Brian.
water source, like the chief has just outlined tonight, so I'll add a provision 9 on fire, water, and I'll work with the chief to get the wording on that, and do a little bit of research on it, just put that in, what our community's doing on water source. And then you'll still have other procedures as determined necessary. So I think we can cover it double.
I kind of have an idea on that, specifically because as the chief mentioned, they might put in Halon. They might have a fire suppression system for these systems that are better than water that they might put in. Can we do something blanket like make number 9 a fire suppression plan approved by?
Well, under the codes that are referenced in here, they're going to need to put internal suppression systems within the units. The question becomes keeping it from spreading, both internally within the project and externally outside. That's where you need the water.
But I'm going where, I think where he was going is it's not always, I think it could be subjective, and it depends on the type of battery and what's around and all sorts of stuff. So I think having a blanket statement as far as like, we need a hydrant X feet away, or we need something X feet away, I think that is subjective to the project. So I'd almost like to roll it back and just reference 855.
Yeah.
And then we look at every project specifically and every technology specifically and see what they're already planning. They might not need additional water where they are, or they might, who knows?
But as a developer, wouldn't you want to know right away if you're citing a project, whether or not you need something 500 feet away and 1,000 feet away to bring water to your project?
Well, you should know if you're up to snuff on what you're developing.
No, because it's not written in our standards. You have
It's in
no
the
idea what it
855.
is.
Aren't we
But it-
referencing these things?
We're saying if it's outside of 855,
The way I understood Chief is and I don't have it in front of me, but is there a standard for hydrants or water sources in 855? And the second half of that is, are you satisfied with the standard in 855? I mean, if 855 says 2 sources are good, do you want 4? If 855 said, what are the key things that you're not satisfied that you think we ought to up? Because I think, yes, there's one thing there's other fire issues that are involved. They're gonna have buildings and other stuff that Chief's gonna wanna have the capability. I think what we had, one of the key points in all of this is these guys are used to, I think, they're used to going to Rumford and putting it on next to the dam in downtown Rumford. They're used to putting it in an industrial park. Gorham's is in an industrial park. Lincoln's is gonna be in a paper mill where the infrastructure is already there. Everything we're gonna do is a natural site, so there may not be, enough water there. And what I wanna do is make sure, particularly in safety, and again, contracts don't even change it, but if there's no contract, Chief, I guess, what do we want? What are you comfortable with? What does that list of stuff you had?
Yeah, I can't recite NFPA 855 for the water distribution, and usually that's based on a municipal water supply, not on what Durham's looking at. Again, I call into Carver because they're looking at the same thing, right? Limited water supply, dry hydrants, and I understand where you're going with it. We've done things with George and I on residential developments that says we'll have a hydrologist sign off on the rainfall, what the drought conditions for Maine are, how big of a surface you need to retain 120,000 gallons, that type of thing. So we've done that before. But I can't, on this, until they give us a plan, I can't recite how much water we'll need.
Here's another idea. That would be to say, just put in here a generic statement about a water supply acceptable to the fire chief.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
And if he doesn't think he needs any, then that's
Yeah,
acceptable.
so if
Yeah,
an
and that's an
NFPA
acceptable form.
I'm good.
NFPA is acceptable, okay, if it's not adequate for
Yeah.
our particular needs, he can say you need more.
Brian, thoughts?
does Carver have a municipal water supply? You keep referencing that.
Sure, only on the outskirts. It is.
We have 0 municipal.
Correct.
Okay.
They're pretty much the
Just wanna
same.
Make sure that we don't.
Yeah, no, I mean,
There's no municipal water supply.
well, I mean, it's been a few years, but their town mimics ours, considering, it's next to Plymouth, Mass, which has it, but then to the outskirts, you're talking, cisterns, dry hydrants, that type of thing. So it really doesn't have a municipal water source. Volunteer fire department, tankers that they have like ours, that they bring the water to you. Mutual aid agreements with other departments that have tankers, to line up to 20,000 gallons type of thing.
Well, and I
And
think,
we're thinking about, the initial fire suppression
Yes.
system and then a secondary.
Yes.
So we have no, I'm being hypothetical here, but to bring a water supply to the town would mean the developer would need to carry it from an adjoining town that has a water system.
Not necessarily.
No, 'cause the standard says something like,
Yeah.
provide 250 gallons a minute for 2 hours on a repetitive basis. Whether that's a plan that they write that says that can use 8 tankers, or we could provide you a tanker if you need, a second one, or we could do a dry hydrant with a pond, a fire pond, and they can do depth, area, that type of thing that could provide, I think we're doing, 230, 180,000 gallons currently in a residential. So it sounds like a lot, but that's not a lot when you get depth and surface area and whatnot.
Well, and I think that's, my thought is this more generic statement that it has to be approved by the chief as part, he reviews it. And if 10 years from now, there's no water involved and somebody comes in, they don't need to provide water. But I think for now, chief would say, I don't have a dry pond anywhere near there. I'm gonna have to haul it a mile and, parts of where we are. So this is what you're gonna have to provide me. And I think if they want to do the project, I'm not talking contract zoning,
Yes.
but they have to meet, the chief's approval, which I don't think is arbitrary or capricious. I think he's our expert on fire safety. He doesn't think the site is safe without something, then.
And I think we can always defer to a fire protection engineer, so you could write that into the language.
Yeah,
Or
Yeah.
fire chiefs determines consulting with the fire protection engineer, they write a check for that type of thing.
Yeah. We might even want to put that in there. Seriously. We've never done these things before, right?
Not this, no.
Yeah, so
So, get back to, and Brian, please give me some latitude here. When they go through site plan review, they're gonna put up an escrow. And you can the planning board will be able to get whatever expertise you need, whether it's hydrology, for whether the pond's gonna go dry or not, or it's, the water supply, any issue, traffic, any issue that you're
Fire
dealing with,
consultant.
that we do not have the in-house capacity to deal with that, you can require the developer to fund that cost. So the chief, if he's looking at this system for the first time, this says acceptable to the fire chief can get the consultant that you're talking about through the peer review escrow system.
okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
So have we beat this?
As long as the peer reviewer has no stake in the
No,
project.
they would be working for the town.
It's kind of like we're doing with residential,
Yeah, with
the
rural
peer
power.
review kind of stuff, so. Any other fire safety questions?
So did we end with what George's recommendation was? Your.
Two options
the
are put in
statement-
specific standards, or secondly, put in a specific statement in here that the water supply has to be acceptable to the fire chief.
I lean towards the second
I
one.
do too. I think that's more general.
Looking around the
better for
room,
now.
is everybody? Okay, I don't think we need to
I guess
vote
I can
on
live
it.
with that.
I think it was your idea. at one
Well, I don't
point.
think I don't like specifying just
Water.
water. I
Yeah.
think it needs to be the entire
Yes.
fire
And
suppression
this lets that
plan.
happen, and I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about a fire plan that,
Well,
Yeah, that covers the entire site,
So if
inside
it's-
out.
Well, why
Phone.
don't we, that's a good point. Can we say instead of water, say fire suppression?
Well, it is water supply for fire suppression, that is the issue that we're talking about.
I know, but
And
can
that's
we-
the one that he has a problem with.
I know, but
You-
your statement again didn't specify water. It just had a fire plan approved by the chief.
Like you can use other stuff for fire suppression aside from
Well,
water.
yes, but I don't want to give them a choice. So to protect their investment, they would do a fire suppression system.
Yeah.
Of, gas,
Yeah.
of whatever they
But
want to do.
we're,
But for us to protect, if that fails, thus the water.
But would we not want to use a fire suppression as well?
I don't think we need to, I think that George's statement, if you say it again, covers it. So if they come in and say, we're gonna use foam, chief said, no, you gotta have water. So that gives him the power to say, hey, planning board, they don't wanna put in water, I recommend you don't approve it. So it's not, what your statement didn't have water specifically.
Okay, so again, I see two different parts to this. What I think you folks are possibly talking about is the internal unit fire suppression systems, no?
No,
Because
well,
those are
I'm
all
talking
specified
about,
by the codes.
I understand that.
Question is, what does the fire department need for spread of fire from the facility or across within the facility, outside of the units that don't have those systems?
Yeah, and I guess the
You're
point is,
saying an alternative to water?
I'm just saying, I think they should provide a plan,
Yes,
inside out, site-wide,
right?
on how to fight the fire. That has to be approved by the chief.
yes, that's, it. So it
Within the
doesn't,
units, outside the units, the entire site,
Correct. Yeah,
there should be a full plan, and it should be approved by the chief.
right,
I think we're saying is this would not be limited to water.
correct. Yeah, this entire emergency management operations plan has to be acceptable to the fire chief.
Yes, and I think
You'll be
you,
looking to them, you approve this.
Yeah.
And you'll be looking to the fire chief and/or a fire consultant to say, is this adequate?
and I think is what's there now cover that, or you had made a statement that I
Yeah,
would
the only,
like.
the only part that doesn't make any mention of water in here, water supply, and the chief is saying there are things beyond NFPA, like the issue of two sources on opposite sides of the facility may not be covered in NFPA,
Correct.
855.
And I'm not saying that his decision is based totally on NFPA.
I understand.
Yeah,
But
so-
I'm just saying, highlighting that as just the water supply necessary, I think would be helpful.
As you know, NFPA is best practices, right? You can reference it in an ordinance specifically, but there's also local control, if you will. And for Durham, dry hydrants, water, always a local issue.
And you are the controller of that. I
Yes.
guess what I'm saying, I don't know that we need to specifically say water in this. Because they should come to you, as in this, and remember, we're not talking about a 12, 13 unit residential development. So they need to come to the town and the various people and say, is this, and probably one of the most important is the fire chief. And have that discussion early on. And say, what is it you're going to, how are you gonna fight fire? Show me your plan to fight fire in and out. And they come and say, we're gonna do all foam and so on and so forth. And you say, what's your plan for a brush fire? What's your plan? I don't see that here. And you've gotta do that. You set the requirements as part of that. We're giving the fire department broad authority to do that.
Yes.
You would say at that point, I need water.
Sure, I defer to George and your board for prepping them that water, not as a cost analysis, but for Durham, you'd have to provide that.
I think what we always say is all these projects is you better see the fire chief, you better see the public works guy and see what he's going to, is he okay with your plan? And then there's a verbiage in here say if he's not, you're not gonna get approved. So that puts the onus on the developer to get with you. And these guys, you can't rely upon it, but if he comes in and says, we always use, whatever it may be, foam, and we're gonna say, you can use whatever you want that the chief approves. That should be, that's the statement I'm trying to get in here.
And I think it might already be in there. K, the emergency operations plan, an emergency operations plan compliant with the NFPA 855 is required. A copy of the emergency operations plan approved by the Durham Fire Department shall be given to the system owner, the local fire department and local code enforcement officer. So I think the whole plan,
It doesn't say, if it's, what this says is if it's compliant with NFPA 855, if it is, and there's no mention of water, he's gonna say, I'm compliant with 855. But you go over to, I keep losing it here, number 7, other procedures are determined necessary by the town to provide for the safety of occupants. Is approved, and it just at the end of that is approved, somewhere in there, they have to get the fire,
I see, I think it ties back to approved by the fire Durham.
it doesn't say approved, that's my problem, George.
It does say approved.
Where am I
A
missing
copy-
that?
A copy of the emergency operations plan approved by the Durham Fire Department.
But
Do you
Where
see
are you
that?
at? Where are you at?
K, line
K,
2.
the K, the second sentence of K.
But in that it says compliant with 855.
That's correct.
So I come in and
But
say,
that's the minimum. It goes on to say, and I'm not sure that 1 through 7 are all in NFPA 855.
yeah, that's why I'd like to see something in there, whether it's a 9 or it's an addition to that, to say, you have to get on fire safety, and it could be in the main paragraph of K, George. Right now it just says compliant with NFPA 855.
That's the starting point. But then it goes on to say, the emergency operations plan approved by the Durham Fire Department shall be given to everybody that's involved in this.
Is that, and maybe it's just me, is that clear that if the chief of the fire department wants something different, or Public Works wants something, different?
Well, this is all fire, not public works. The emergency operations plan.
As long as we're comfortable that it is not just meeting the minimum standards of 855.
I think so.
I agree with you.
With me or George?
With you, that
Okay.
it should go beyond NFPA.
Yeah, I mean, I think it
This
needs
is
to.
saying-
I think it
This is
does.
saying that chief needs to confirm that it meets NFPA 855 and that's it.
Yeah, that's the way I read it. And we want to be clear with that so that it doesn't leave
Okay.
I'm going to talk to my lawyer because we don't think that's what it says, and then we're into that kind of contest. So the verbiage that Mark used, that you had used to have, whether it's a 9 or it's part of,
So I think
7.
if I rework K, basically combining the first 2 sentences, I can clarify that.
as long as it's clear that it's
Yep.
it's not just NFPA.
Yeah. Make clear, yeah. I got
Chief,
it.
are you good with that?
Yes, sir.
Now, do you still want to have a reference in 1 through 8 or 9 on water supply or not?
I think if it doesn't have water, then Chief does, and he wants water, there's no water there, he doesn't approve it.
So this, if we fix that first part, then he'll have whatever he needs for water without specifically.
I would
mentioning
ask Chief first, are you good with that? What he just asked?
Yeah,
Do you want somewhere in here to say specifically water?
you can, because that covers the town, right? More is more in this case, more is more to protect. But, continuing those paragraphs before you get to 1 through 8 there, the last sentence up top, the emergency operations plan shall include the following information. And again, you go down to 7, other procedures. You could put other procedures such as water, but other procedures as determined by the town to provide the safety.
Mark,
Or
is that what
one
you're getting
sentence.
to with number 9?
You can add number 9, or water distribution as per the town fire chief.
You mentioned adding a number 9. Is that what he's?
I was just hitting on the complete fire suppression plan, but I mean, I think reworking the start of K, and then also you could say I kind of like other procedures such as water supply.
That
determined
puts
by
him on
town
notice that,
officials.
be prepared. Because if there's a major brush fire, there's 40 acres, 5 of them are best, and 30 of the acres are burning, there's gotta be enough water to put it out before it gets to best.
Yes.
And they
yes.
need to provide that.
And just like the municipal development, it's not just for the development, it's also for the surrounding areas. So if you provide a dry hydrant, it's not just for their investment, it's for the entire town, betterment of the town in that area.
Okay, my head is beginning to hurt. So other procedures such as water,
Let me do some work.
yeah. Okay, but I want to, we'll talk about timing after this, but we not tonight, but we need to get to an end on this. So is there anything else from your perspective, Chief, that if we cover water some way, and you'll get a chance to look at it, so.
Nope, he has annual fire drills, he has monitoring, fire detection systems, remote access, compliance with inspections, road access. I know that, talks about, because the road commissioner would have to sign off on that particular part. He has GVW, of the road, turning radius, gate access, parking, unit spacing, yes, George has,
Okay, if your car, if adding such as water, and I get your concern, but you know, this does give you through us a lot of power or ability to require stuff, you know, such as water. So I would assume that,
and on record, like to say, just for the safety of their investment, or anybody's investment, right, in the town.
okay,
That's literally the fire chief, right? Somebody's investment in the town.
yeah.
That's all.
So I've got to relieve my cranial pressure.
The
So
water,
we're
yeah,
done
put
with-
water.
We're done with as discussed.
ICP is high, no
Okay.
problem.
Is that a real?
Intracranial pressure, yep.
So,
I have a drill for that, but you let me know.
can you get it out of I got a new drill for my birthday, so anyway, we are trying to move along. So, do we have any other questions or concerns for the chief?
I think we did get comments back, and there is one relating to the fire.
Sure.
permit.
I mean, yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, 5.7.3A.
Whose comment was
This is from Rachel.
it? So this is from Mission Control. or
Yes.
whatever they are.
Yes. 5.7.3, Section A, all permits required by state codes, including but not limited to building permit, an electrical permit, and a fire department permit. The question is, what is this? What is a fire department permit? Perhaps I should continue. Shall be required for installation of all battery energy storage systems. So maybe we're
I don't think
saying-
there is such a thing. I mean, I think,
No.
yeah, I
In
think,
a fire department review or fire.
well, that's part of our site plan review. So, but let's get to, yeah,
Some municipalities, it would cost, plan review could cost, you know, fire permit to pull that could cost. Currently, I believe the town doesn't have a fee schedule for a fire permit, if you will.
There is no.
there is no
Fire
fire. Yeah,
permit.
there is no, I mean, that's part of my, is there things that she provided, that company did a very good job. But I don't think we're gonna ask for a fire permit, as this. What we're gonna ask the chief to do
Fire review.
is to review it as he does other site plans.
Yes, and other municipalities would charge for that.
Yeah.
Currently, we do not have a fee schedule for the fire department side of things.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Different subject, though.
That's all I saw, John.
Okay. Are we ready to let the chief go home?
And sometimes those permits are based on the totality of the investment, right?
Yeah.
1%, something like that, but Durham does not have any of that for the fire side.
Is chief ready to let himself go home?
I will check. No, any other questions? Again, you can go through George, you can go through John. You're always welcome to email me, you know, at the town website. Very important, right? Because it's the safety of the citizens, so anytime.
Super. And if George writes up the language, you'll get a chance
Yes.
to look at it. And
Yep, I'm CC'd in a lot.
please let us know.
Okay.
Okay, so I think the next step would be, we've let chief go, to kind of, part of this still going through the comments piece, is we did get comments from others, so can we go through those comments? We're still responding to public
Thank you,
comments.
Chief.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, chief. Let me know tomorrow, chief.
Yes, sir, I got a note for that.
Okay, I guess the first one that submitted was Jason Queen, and he I think had some comments, but I don't see any specific ones from him. George, did I miss
The very
something?
bottom.
Yeah, he referenced somebody within his network that was talking about systems in California and other parts of the country.
And he
Touching on a
said,
lot of the same points that we've been discussing.
okay, buying a new fire truck and so on and so forth. Okay, I don't see anything in here that we've already discussed. You know, he talks about, we require a large water tank and hose hookup on site. If chief thinks he needs it, they will do that, and some of that stuff may come out of, if we have contract zoning. So moving on.
One thing, sorry, that he did bring up, I'm not sure if we have a section, it starts, the new systems that are contained in the cube or pack have the best fire test ratings. New laws require that each manufacturer perform heat and fire tests and rate their own equipment. Local town would be best to mandate in their ordinance that only certain manufacturers with these types of systems and at a certain rating be allowed. I'm not sure if we talk much about fire ratings in here, but maybe that's again something we can reference, or could be referenced in 855.
And
I'm not
the
sure.
UL stuff, I mean, I think,
Yeah,
I think if they meet I think what we said was you gotta, there's like 5 or 6 things you have to meet. UL this, NFPA that, UL whatever, so.
Yeah, I don't think it's our job to limit manufacturers.
no, but what this person is saying is that some of them require that the manufacturer perform heat and fire tests and rate their own equipment.
Yeah, that's covered in 5.7.3 D.
Okay,
All of those codes,
okay,
they require that kind of testing.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Great, great,
And those are in here. They
Okay.
might not have
Okay,
picked up on that.
great. Yeah, that was what I saw.
So moving on, I appreciate, if they're listening, I appreciate the 2 gentlemen taking the time to do that and working with George on it. Next on my list is John Simino, had, I think, 3 comments. And so, one, if you've got that in front of you, so 5.7.1, paragraph 3, he's talking about putting it in the table of land uses, which is something that,
We did, right?
Yes, the town attorney has drafted that, which I
Yes, you
have if you want to talk
Okay.
about that tonight.
She did.
So in all zones aside from RA.
so, yeah, let's hold on to that, and we'll talk
Okay.
about that, if you don't mind, we'll
Yeah,
talk about that table specifically. The next one is 5.7.2, paragraph, 5. Okay, somebody's gotta help me with that, because as I remind you, I failed my final in electrical engineering at one point, so,
Are we misspeaking in our thing? So what he's talking about is that when we're talking about energy, flowing, it's kilowatts. When you're talking about consuming energy, you need to add the hour to the unit. So kilowatts per hour or something like that. So I don't know if he was speaking to spots in our ordinance where we're not.
So Juliet, if you
yeah.
look at 5.7.2,
Okay.
under applicability,
Yep.
we reference kilowatt hours,
Yep.
and then if you go to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we reference megawatt hours. I'm pretty sure that's what he's referring to.
yeah, it is, but I mean, which is right, is my question.
Well, megawatts and kilowatts are the same. It's just bigger or smaller.
No, it's a dash out, is it kilowatts per hour, or is it just kilowatts?
I think
John, if you're
kilowatts.
listening,
It's 50 kilowatts over 1 hour, or 25 kilowatts over 2 hours, or 10 kilowatts over 5 hours.
I think-
It's the total amount of energy that it stores.
I think kilowatt
24
hours is the
hours.
proper
Yes,
term for the storage.
yes.
Okay, you don't get a vote, but he's voting for you. But thank you for that. So.
But Brian, did you say there's somewhere in here where we're just mentioning kilowatts or megawatts?
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah.
We don't mention kilowatt per hour. He's saying it should be kilowatts dash hour.
We say,
So we do.
we say hour.
KWH.
Yeah,
KWH.
MWH, KWH.
Oh, yeah.
That's-
Yeah.
that's
regarding
kilowatt
yeah,
hours.
the batteries
That's fair.
themselves are kilowatt hours.
I think reading that comment, his specific thing is with number 5, which says flow batteries. I don't know what a flow battery is, but it's battery, so I would think it's kilowatt hours. But I think
And
his
it is,
issue
but
is with
our-
the flow part.
It says, oh,
I think it's right the way it is, probably.
okay.
Again, I don't know what a flow battery is, but I think his issue is with flow, and if it's flowing electricity, it's kilowatts, not kilowatt hours. Is the way I read it.
I got you.
I could be wrong.
So we're gonna leave it at kilowatt hour, KWH.
Can we make sure we're all on the same page with this somehow?
Which page? I'm messing with you, I'm sorry.
Well, the consensus seems to be it should be KWH. I mean, Michael, you know, and I would agree that, and we've already doing that. So if the word flow bothers people, change it to batteries, I don't, you know, that'll confuse everything. So I don't know what a flow
Oh, that's what
battery
you're
is.
saying, the flow section.
It's a specific type of battery.
Oh, that's what he's saying.
Would you,
Was it
please
my
just
accent?
slide up, that way
Was
people
my
can
accent?
hear what you're saying, Michael. But I appreciate your expertise.
I'm not sure if I have expertise.
Turn it on,
Oh.
hit the button, please, and wait just a second. You have to hold it, I
It
think.
may be out of battery.
It probably
We have
is.
two,
I thought that
The
was fun.
MR.
we had 3 people talk.
A flow battery is a specific type of battery, just like a lead battery or nickel battery.
Okay.
It's a liquid-based battery.
I got you.
So I think the flow is confusing you.
I got you, okay.
So it's just the title for the battery, just like
Correct.
lithium.
It's a
is the title.
specific type of battery that's based on liquids,
Okay.
Yeah.
which is why it's called flow. But it, you know, solid state doesn't have liquid in it,
Okay.
for example.
So I would suggest we've done what Mr. Seminola was
Yeah, I think we're
recommending.
good.
Yeah, I think we're all set on that.
And then 5.7.3E, what is an all-weather surface? I think you changed that language, George, to reference the town standards. Okay, so then the next
Good.
one,
Thank you, John.
yes. So then the next one is,
Rachel Walker.
yes, Rachel Walker, who looks to me like someone who might be interested, works for a firm that might be interested in doing that, doing this A project, not necessarily the project. So looking at her comments, the first one is 5.7.2 applicability. I think she's correct. It says bylaw, George.
That's been changed.
Okay, so that's already been changed. The next one is fire department permits. We don't issue that. And it says all permits required by state includes. We will require a local permit. So it would be more than just state code, which I had not noticed before.
Yeah, and I think it looks to me like her suggestion at the end of this is to rewrite this to read all permits required by federal, state, and local codes shall be required to drop out the including but not limited to.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I think
that
that's
would-
a good recommendation.
I think that is a
Yep.
good recommendation.
Looking to my left, everybody, so we would change it, George, to all permits required by federal, state, and local codes.
Yep.
Good.
And then we're moving on to 5.7.4. It talks about a special permit. Do we mean, we're not talking about a conditional use permit, or are we? I guess if it's just standalone best ordinance, it could be a conditional use permit. So I'm talking about 5.7.4, permitting requirements for tier 1.
It would be conditional use.
It would be, okay. So if we could change special to conditional use, that's actually 5.7.5, I'm sorry, I read the wrong one.
What about site plan review? It would just be a conditional use permit
Yeah.
and site plan review as well, but that's not
Yeah.
really a permit.
Yeah, it says under that they're subject to site plan review.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next is 5.7.5E on setbacks. I think they are taking exception to the 100 feet setback. My feeling is that it could be less than that in the Lincoln paper mill, it could be less than that in Rumford sites, but we're talking about putting these out in, for lack of a better term, virgin territory, and I don't think a 100-foot setback is it's different than the industrial sites and all those other kinds of things.
And that's consistent with all other non-residential development in Durham.
Good point. Is everybody
Yeah.
in agreement? We leave it at 100 feet, the setback?
Yes, I am.
Okay. She's asking for a 7-foot high chain link with barbed wire. Barbed wire may be required by utility. I don't see a problem with leaving it 8, and if they need barbed wire, it becomes 9, or whatever the width of the height of the barbed wire is.
Well, if it was 8 and 7 and had the barbed wire that
It'd
extends
still
up
be
to
8.
8 feet, it'd be 8 feet. I
Yep.
think what she's looking at is be more specific about the type of fencing to make sure it meets their security and safety requirements.
We say it by a minimum, so if they wanna go 7 plus barbed wire, it equals 8.
Yeah, but I think what she's looking at in terms of other potential companies coming in as well is that you want to make sure that they have adequate fencing in terms of chain link as opposed to, you know, some of the things we looked at for solar
Like an ad fence or
are
something.
not as critical.
If we put chain link in though, we're stuck with chain link,
Yeah,
is my concern. You know, so if there was another option, I don't know what it would be off the
Yeah,
top of my
see,
head.
so remember back with solar, you didn't want chain link
Yes,
for the
Right.
aesthetics. Here, you may need chain link and the board would probably accept chain link if it's in an area where you're not as concerned with the view impacts. But again, these are gonna be screened with vegetation.
as was solar, or as will be solar.
I think we can push back on this comment and say what we have is fine for now. In other ordinances, it's just 7 feet, 8 feet, whatever, blank. And then the developer comes in and proposes what, you know, and then we go from there.
Yeah, we don't preclude chain link in this
Right,
one.
we don't
In
preclude it.
solar, we prevented it or didn't allow
Yeah.
it. Thoughts, Juliet's,
8-foot-high fence works for me.
okay?
Yeah, fine with it.
Next one, I think, is vegetated buffer. The discussion is, it could be a fire hazard, an opaque fence to screen.
It is a pretty big buffer. We are asking for quite a big buffer around
Where
these
it's
things.
needed.
Yeah,
Visual impact analysis, I did add that. We talked about that. So if they have a landscape architect that does a visual impact analysis of the site, and they say, this side on the road needs the 50-foot buffer. That side is all woods, does not need a buffer. That side is power line, does not need a buffer. So the visual impact analysis will get into that. And as far as the safety in terms of fire hazard, you know, there's gonna be a 100-foot setback. And as we discussed with the solar farms, within that, you're gonna have the 50-foot buffer, and then there's another 50 feet, and then you get to the fence. So there's, and the standards will require the 30-foot clearance from any type of vegetation for fire safety.
that's what
purposes.
she's talking about.
Right.
So
But the
yes, I did
50
see
feet
that
isn't
somewhere.
pushed up against it.
Right, where is that piece of it in it? The space, did we talk about the space between the battery and veg? I think we do,
I
right?
think so.
So I think that's what she's talking about, it's just in a separate section.
Okay, so if we have covered that, I am not prone to reducing screening, buffering, other things, again, because of where it's located. Now, if as George says, it's in the middle of a 40-acre or bigger site, and, you know, there's plenty of natural vegetation around it. The problem, you know, is it's up against an agricultural field, but somebody puts their house in there. And I'm a big fan of buyer beware. You know that best system is there. But I guess in an effort to protect the natural beauty or rural setting, I'm not prone off the top of my head or this early to say we'll change minimum standards. On
So
setbacks
the
and stuff.
standard for 30
I
feet,
saw it,
you found
D.
it?
Yeah,
D.
I found it, so it is in there.
Okay, super.
Well, the 30 feet on each side
Away
shall be
from the
cleared
units.
of combustible
Yep.
veg, so that's what, yep,
So they're gonna
so
have,
that's covered.
start at the road, again, assuming this is next to a road. You'd have the setback, 100 feet. Within that, you're gonna have a 50-foot buffer. So there's 50 feet there to play with. Then they're gonna have the fence, and then the units are gonna be inside that fence a distance to be accessible all the way around them. So I don't think that's an issue.
No, I don't think so either. So John, back to what you were just saying, are you okay with what George is talking about regarding the buffer?
Yeah,
What-
I'm-
okay.
I am, and I guess it's too early to say about whether if they came in and somebody said we don't need it here, I may not agree with it, but at this point, with the verbiage here is fine.
Okay,
I think next is noise, and they are recommending, an increase in the allowable noise, from 55 during the day and 45 at night to, I think it's 80, and 45. And I think the same thing. We're putting this out in rural areas where there is not a lot of ambient noise. And the sawmill that we approved couldn't exceed 55 at the property line.
yeah, and that was with a generator, right?
Yes, that was, their noise level on that site could not exceed 55. And
Yeah, I don't
so,
see why would we reduce our requirements for this.
yeah, I mean, if that's a problem, there are ways to mitigate noise for this. So-
And there's another aspect of this that I will now bring into contract zoning, because we heard from the town attorney that basically any standard in here can be adjusted through the contract zone. So for that zone, because it's in an area where sound is not as much of an issue, you got gravel pits and other types of sawmills right there, or whatever it is, the contract zone could specify a higher noise level. So that's one option, just for that one project in that one location under those conditions. But also there's sound attenuation that can be done, walls, for example, like you see along the highway, that cuts the noise. So you could have sound attenuation, and you can also have negotiation as part of a contract zone to deal with that noise issue, if it's necessary to go above those levels.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
That would, again, I would leave it the way it is now, but yeah, 50, because other uses are required to meet that. I think we've covered this. I'm just looking to see what their next,
Decommissioning,
decommissioning.
which is a good point. So she's asking to be more specific on how much, like, the bond is for. Typically, what I've seen is that there's an estimate provided within the decom plan
Yep.
to what it would cost to decommission the project.
And the
And then-
basis for making that estimate.
That's correct. And then usually a escalator every year, and that a bond is needed ahead of signing the building permit for that amount that's in the decom plan, but I'm trying to see if there's.
I guess my question would be, that would be part of the discussion that we would have with, I mean, we would just say, when you come in, if it's $1 million to decommission this in 20 years, that's what we're gonna expect.
Yeah. Well, what
Bond.
she's saying is she wants to see more details of what we would expect, so that they can plan.
I think we would leave that on the applicant to say, how much would it
Yeah.
cost for this
Yes,
to be
no, they do.
decommissioned, right?
But we don't,
So,
sorry, Brian.
that's okay, go ahead.
So yes, but what we're not saying here is, we're not saying, bond required ahead of building permit per the decom estimate provided in the decom plan. We're not saying that, we're just saying generally, I think, like, in an amount to be determined by the town, is what we say.
Okay, but I mean, they would come in and we would ask, and I would think that would be something we would want to review. So if they come in and say, hey, it's only $100,000 to haul this stuff away.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And we would, well, that may set off alarms, but we would also say, hey, what is it, we could say, okay, prove it to us, that, or we want, $10,000 to determine that. And I'd like to wait for George to come back, because we've gone through a whole bunch of legal questions about bond, The language I think is fine, which can mean fund or other surety acceptable to the town. And I think that's the language we've used for other escrows.
Yeah.
Like the solar, I think that's probably close to the language we've used. So that's my thought is, you give us an estimate of what you think it's gonna be, And, you know, we'll have somebody tell us whether that's good or not, or we just go straight to somebody who handles this business and we get an estimate from them. And all costs of the financial security shall be borne by the applicant.
Juliet, are you concerned with the bond?
No,
Okay,
no.
all right, cool.
George, we're on decommissioning fund, and two things. One is to maintain a fund or other surety acceptable to the town, and I know we've had this discussion multiple times, like solar and other things. What is acceptable? We don't need to define that here, but is this the same language we use in solar?
Yep.
And we've already kind of gone through that. And then the other piece of it, they're asking for parameters on how that is done, or how it's calculated. And my thought would be, two things. You pay us to hire somebody to tell us what that's gonna be, because we don't know, and how to calculate it. Or you give us something and we'll bounce that off somebody to see if it's the correct amount. Is that,
Yeah.
am I going the right way, folks? Is that?
Yeah.
So, I don't see any changes there. And then site plan application, comment, consider making a table or further clarify the timing for the materials listed. I guess the materials are required when they apply, right, George? Is there materials, what she's saying is, hey, some of these things are not available with site plan approval.
Yeah, I think what she was referring to, and I haven't had a chance yet to go through all of those comments, getting everything else ready and dealing with the last two nights' meetings. So I will spend a little bit more time going through all of these beyond your comments. But I think one of the issues that she was raising on that point, if I can remember, was what was the topic again? That particular one?
Well, she says usually cannot provide spec sheet at a time.
Yeah, the spec sheets, what she's saying is, they don't know exactly which units they're gonna be using necessarily at the time of either contract zoning or site plan review. But I think in order for you to verify that you're going to, that they're gonna meet all the safety codes, you have to have that.
Yeah.
So, and then I would point out that if they come in with a proposed unit, then they want to change it, it's a pretty simple site amendment. And as long as the alternatives meet those same codes, there's no problem.
Yeah, it's
I
not
think
like,
we're covered with that, the way that it's written right now.
I think I tend to agree, as I hear what you're saying, but, you know, we're talking, if it's just this, at this level, we're talking a few months. I mean, what would normally take, because, and it may be 5 months if they don't, you know, we'll get to contract zoning at some point in time. But we move fairly quickly on site plan applications, and the timing is, if you get us this stuff, we'll review it.
Well, I think it's more the issue of they get their permits and then they're gonna find somebody to build it. They're the developer, but they're gonna take proposals from companies that are gonna be submitting their equipment. And so they wouldn't necessarily have picked which company, which equipment they're gonna be using at the time that they're applying for their building permit, because they don't have the permits yet. So that, I think, is what they're trying to deal with, and they want as much flexibility as they can have, but you have to make sure that these all meet the safety requirements, so I think you're gonna have them. And if they wanna come in, they could propose two as part of their application.
Well, I think we've covered this, so if you look at 5.7.6, a preliminary equipment specification sheet that documents the proposed battery energy storage system. And then a final equipment specification sheet shall be submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Right.
So basically, if their batteries change between the site plan approval and the building permit, they would just have to prove to the codes guy, who would have them reviewed, or however he wants to do it, that the final selection would be okay. I mean, I think we've already kind of done that, what she's asking.
But
yeah,
I'm gonna put words in your mouth here.
Sure.
I think if you base the building permit based on a certain specification, things change after the building permit process. The subcontractor could propose a different system or piece of equipment that differs from what was presented for the building permit. And in the building permit process, the contractor should be telling the CEO of any changes through that process.
And I guess that's, but if, so we'll get specs for the site plan that will have reviewed or whatever. Then they're gonna come into the codes guy and say, we're ready for the building permit. At that point, you're saying they have not finalized the battery type? Because they've got it, the building permit's gonna say the building's gonna be so big, and this is what all the layout
Well, it
is
may not
going
be
to
a
be.
building. It may just be these units spread over 5 acres like Orem. No building, no building.
But they're gonna
Let's
have to have a
say-
permit to,
Electrical permits.
Whatever permit
Yeah.
it is.
yeah, that's,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
change it.
So this gentleman is not here tonight. I'm gonna call some people out. There was a public comment by a town resident who works for an electrical contractor. Let's say that electrical contractor bid and won the award to build this thing. And in his contract, it says that you should, under the owner's best interest, provide us with equipment that could help reduce the cost of the project. And so they based their bid on the spec.
Yep.
But as time goes on, supply chain issues occur, or better technology occurs, and they say, hey, we can get you equipment B sooner than equipment A at a better cost
I
and
gotcha.
in a better timeline. That would change the spec that came upon the building permit.
Well, I mean, that's honestly on the developer. I don't know if we have anything in here that says if above and beyond minimum changes happen, they're gonna have to come back, right?
I don't think they have to come back. I
I
just
know
think
for
that
certain
this
things.
covers it. I really do think this covers
agree.
it. That,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that under the building permitting process, somebody would be notified of any change in spec.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they would
Yeah,
have to
yeah, yeah.
verify at that point that it still meets all the
Yeah, we're
safety.
saying the same thing here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think,
And we didn't make these up. These are like set requirements for these types of projects across states. Like, these aren't,
yeah.
yep.
I think,
The only question is, George, if you had said there may not be a building permit because it's gonna be multiple containers, are we using the wrong term for, the codes guy is going to approve something. Is it an electrical permit
Yeah.
or,
it's a structure, right? Isn't, all structures need building permits?
some of these are not structures. I mean, the
I
ones.
mean,
that-
right, but if they are a structure, they're going to need a building
Yes, but if
permit.
they're not, like, again, I keep bringing up Rumford. Rumford's just like 8 or 10, 12 Connex
Those are
things.
structures, right?
So
Is
why
it
don't we just
trailer or-
put building and other permits?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, good question, but I don't know, because you don't go inside of some of them. So I think we covered her,
One
those,
more.
we don't
She has
agree
one
with them, but we've
Yeah,
covered
yeah.
them. We've discussed them.
Next one is 5.7.9, abandonments. We talked about this a little bit.
We started that
It's
discussion.
your topic.
I think 90 days is fine. She suggests 12 months, and
So I think our definition of abandonment is what might be concerning, or not concerning, but confusing. We're saying abandoned as in it's not operating consistently, right? Not like, oh, we had an off day here and there. We're saying it's not running for like.
Or they had to shut it down
Or they
for
had to
3
shut it
months
down.
to replace all the batteries. or
Something like that.
Yeah.
And that they're not communicating, right? Because I think didn't we talk about if they're communicating with us, there's a weather issue, something like that, maybe we could.
It doesn't say that in here.
But
just-
didn't we talk about that?
we discussed the definition of operation. We did.
Yes, and I think we agreed that it is, it may not be storing energy, but in my mind, as we discussed last time, if they're in the process of replacing batteries, or if something is, the ice storm of 98 and all the power lines are down and they can't operate, they're there, it's functioning, to me, abandonment is, we're broke, we're gone. So and I don't know if we need to define that specifically, but I think they're operating it, they're guarding it, the security's in place, they're working on it, or they're waiting for the power lines to be fixed, whatever it may be.
Plus, what happens with abandonment is then decommissioning starts. And so either the developer is gonna do that themselves, or if they default, the town's gonna do it. And so the town's gonna be contacting whoever owns the property to say, it appears to us this is abandoned. After 90 days, the town will say, wait a minute, thing hasn't been operating for the last 3 months. Then they will contact the property owners to say, we're gonna invoke the decommissioning bond. And they come back and say, no, it's not abandoned, we're doing whatever we're doing. We're still here.
Yeah, if we agree that they are in fact doing
So
it.
it's automatic, and all of a sudden, it's all done.
Right.
The town now
The 90-day
begins-
mark, we're in there pulling
begins
stuff out.
The town begins a process after 90 days, and they can stop that by just saying, no, here's what
Yeah.
we're doing.
And the town agrees that that's okay.
Yeah.
I think what she's picking up on is that in other jurisdictions, they do have a lot longer
Right.
time frame than 90 days. But, I mean, honestly, for something not to be operated, if I owned an
Yeah.
asset not operated for 90 days, that's a long time.
Well, and if,
What's going on?
and if you don't have any intention to do that, I mean, I guess if the codes guy drives down the road and you know, doesn't see anything going on, and there's been no, I mean, first off, I don't know if we know it's working or not. I mean, if it's a good system, you
I don't know that you know.
if it's a good system, it would, we shouldn't know. If we, you know, we shouldn't hear it, we shouldn't see it.
Right. But you'll notice that they're out there mowing the grass like they're supposed
Yes,
to.
if that, exactly, good point.
Yeah.
If the tumbleweeds are blowing through that sucker,
And plowing the road.
Then we're in the wrong state.
But we're assuming that her
Tumbleweeds.
definition
And
of
plowing the
abandonment
road.
is the same as ours. She might be thinking abandonment is similar to decommissioning.
I think it may be concerned with being cited for a violation, you know.
Maybe we need a definition of abandonment? I don't know.
I guess, or ceases, I mean, to me, to operate is you're there, you're doing the things you need. It may not be storing it because of whatever reason. Power lines are down, you know, I have 98, I wasn't here, but all I do is remember my in-laws and people up here complaining about, it's been a long time and I still don't have power. I'm not prone to change that. I mean, I think that, if you want to go something different, I guess one way or another, I'm not gonna lose 6 months, a year. I hate to just think that they have in fact truly abandoned it. We want a year, and you know, then before we can start doing anything. And it says we may. It doesn't say we have to.
Nope.
And again, like George said,
Shall be.
yeah, we're just happy. I mean, businesses walk away from bonds, you know, because they don't want to screw with cleaning up environmental issues or whatever it may be. And so I think sooner rather than later, we need to move on from that. So I guess I'm open to other thoughts, but I'm okay with 90 days.
I'm good with 90 days.
Okay? And I think 90, we leave that as is. Okay, so now we've covered all the comments. And so are there any other things that have not been commented on that we see in the thing that we would want
I
to,
think for me, it's the big ticket items. Oh, actually, I did have one thing. So, well, it might be big ticket. Discussing the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 thing. Again, the size. Section, when we split out B, section, no, not section B. 5.7.5.
5E.
5.7.5, so we have A through, whatever letter we go to. In here, we talk about, we say the following requirements apply to all tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 vests, except where it is specifically noted to apply only to tier 2 and tier 3 vests. I think the idea, and please let me know if I'm wrong, is that almost all of these, if not all of these, are only for tier 2 and tier 3. Is that correct? Like, are we requiring a 50-foot landscape strip for tier 1 projects?
No.
Okay, so then G, we need to say tier 1 and tier 2. I mean, sorry, tier 2 and tier 3.
Wait, where are you? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, 5.7.5.
Okay. G.
Yeah, specifically G, we don't mention only tier 2, tier 3. We don't mention only tier 2, tier 3 for noise. So if there's any of these, are there any of these letters that we would require tier 1? Like, would we want a decomp fund for tier 1 projects?
I see. So I think what I'm hearing you say is we've already said tier 1 does not apply.
Well, tier 1 residential is not.
Tier 1 residential.
Well, tier 1
But-
still has to meet all of those safety codes.
Yes,
But your question
yes,
is,
exactly,
but
tier
do
1,
they, but
yeah.
do they have to meet other stuff in here?
right,
And it specifically references only tier 1 and tier 2 for some of these things,
Right.
but not for all of them.
right.
Tier
So-
tier 2s and 3.
Tier 2s and 3, certain things, it says, these all apply, where it's specifically noted to apply to only tier 2 and 3. Otherwise, all of these apply to tier 1, is I think the way we should read this.
That's the way I read it. And also, we said before that it says above that tier 1, except for residential, as we discussed earlier, is subject to site plan review. So
But we're taking that out. Right? Didn't we decide to take that out?
we did take we were taking the site plan review out and leave it as such provisions of the ordinances
Which is
are
the
applicable.
safety, which is where we're going, specifically safety. Tier 1 still has to follow safety
Well,
and building permits and electrical permits.
well, I also think that if it's tier 1 non-residential, then we'll catch it site plan because of just the regular conditional use and site plan review process, I think.
I think you're right.
Well, how would we catch it if we say tier 1 is not, we don't say
So
something.
a tier 1 is probably gonna be either within a commercial building, like a room or something with a bunch of these, or it's gonna be, I think even one of those containers would be a megawatt, right? Those are
Mhm.
typically a megawatt, so it's not even gonna be that.
Mhm.
So the question is, should we go down through these, and I can do that before the next meeting, and just look at, and maybe we can just get some guidance right now, which of these should apply to something,
Tier
and
1.
which one doesn't need to? Because we could add that same language for tier, or separate them, put everything that applies to all of them, including tier 1, at the beginning, and then the following shall apply to tier 2 and tier 3.
Yeah, exactly. Or if we decide there's none that apply to tier 1, just strike that sentence and say the following requirements apply to only tier 2 and tier 3.
Yeah, but I think things like the signage, the safety signage on these units, those probably would apply.
Okay, can we step back though? How big is tier 1? What are we talking about when we say tier 1?
Again, that's
Half a
over
megawatt.
half a megawatt.
Under.
I'm sorry, under a half a megawatt.
Under half a megawatt, so
Correct.
20 kilowatts?
No, it's 500, right?
Yes, but is it 20 kilowatt?
It's between the size limits in 572 and a half megawatt, right? Because we're saying if it's under 70 kilowatts for lead acid, it's acceptable. But if it's more than that, but less than half a megawatt, it's tier 1. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Well, I think that tier 1 would include battery, like assemblies of batteries that would be composite up to, because that's how they're all made, right?
Yeah. I mean,
And thousands of those individual batteries with those limitations that we talked about.
Not to confuse the issue, but in my mind, we haven't really defined what a residential use is. I mean, maybe that's where we start, is that, going back to that, is we had, 6 different types of batteries. And one of the comments was, for lithium, 30 is too much. Excuse me, not enough. Wait. It should be great. it should be greater than, we should allow greater than 30, is what I'm saying here. So if we can create a residential thing by saying it's 60 kilowatts or whatever it may be, or we stick with 30. But to me, it's not real clear what, if somebody has 60 kilowatts of lithium, then they are a tier 1 system. And they, whatever rules we come up with tier 1 apply.
Can we just say residential? What's wrong with that? Residential use.
We don't put a limit, I don't, my question is that okay?
Like, what is a house going to use 500 kilowatts for?
Well,
Like,
that's,
they can't, they're not allowed to
Living off the
connect.
grid.
no, I understand that, but if it's 70, the way this is written now, if it's 70 kilowatts, it's because it's greater than 30 lithium.
Yes.
It's greater than 30, and I'm hearing that 30 is not enough because there could be 60, 50, 70, whatever. So if it's 60 or 40, then it becomes a tier 1.
Right, but what I'm saying, exactly, that's the problem. But so
Yes.
why don't we just say residential use instead?
Well,
What's
like,
the problem with that?
could you have somebody who's gonna do residential? Is that open a door where somebody could put in 100 and not
Possibly.
follow any of the rules and sell it? I guess if it's, because you've got solar that's residential, but you sell your excess. So it's not being used for your house. See what I'm
I
saying?
see, like net,
And maybe that doesn't happen with batteries.
yeah, I don't.
So I'm kind of okay with coming up with some, and it could be 100 or whatever it may be. And I think we should have a residential one. So if I'm doing a residential system, I look at this and I say, okay, mine's gonna be under 60 or 100. I don't have to follow these rules. So that, and after that, then we get into that. Is there a number? So on, lead, nickel, lithium, sodium.
Well, it looks like 70 is the highest there, but why don't we just say 70 or 100 then? If we have to put a number in.
Is this from Carver?
Let me, Mike or somebody, your expertise has been useful. What is a good number? You've got the batteries in your home.
I have one battery, so
One battery.
I'd be exempted.
Yes,
They're expensive.
yes, well, I get it, but I don't know, is 30, I think you said 30 was too low.
Well, I think the average, if you look at average household use, it's 30 kilowatts as an average. That's the average usage by a home. And so if someone wants to be able to be off the grid for a couple of days, they're gonna need, 60 kilowatts would provide you, if there's no sun, would provide you 2 days of power. So it's not a ton. And I think for consistency, these should all be the same.
70.
I mean,
So-
I think 70, 100, those are reasonable, seem more reasonable to me. I mean, that would, if you pick 70, that would be, 4 batteries. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to put that in, but they
No,
could.
but you would allow that.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's reasonable to me that we shouldn't discriminate against battery.
yeah, I mean, if you want to pick a safer number, I don't know what the magic number is, but somewhere
Yeah.
between 70 and 100, I would think.
Yeah. I agree with that. I also agree with why, I don't know why we need to list all these different types.
Yeah, it's confusing, and I think, I can't really see the rationale why sodium, which is less flammable than lithium, would have a lower threshold. It doesn't make any sense to me, and, solid state batteries are safer still, but they would fall under the other battery technologies. It's
Yeah,
just
which
very
is even
confusing.
smaller, that's
Yes.
10.
How about if we just go, subject to this ordinance are only those that exceed the following capacity, 70 kilowatt hours. We eliminate the, 5 or 6 optional things there.
I think that'd be simpler and probably more reasonable from my perspective.
Thoughts, planning board?
I'm okay with 70, I'm okay with 100 too, but
I mean, I guess what happens if someone wants to put in 6 batteries to their house, then what? I mean, just hypothetically.
Well, at some point in time, we have to draw a line. I mean, if 6 batteries is 100 kilowatts, they have to go through the tier one process.
Yeah,
Right, that's
At
what-
the way I just proposed.
okay, okay.
So,
I mean, okay,
well, I mean, there's gotta be a line or some, because what happens, somebody wants to put in 40, want to
Yeah.
fill their basement, and store.
yeah, it's true, it's true.
uh,
I think if you put in 70, that'll take care of 99% of applicants.
Okay.
George, do we have any rationale behind why Carver came up with these numbers?
As I said, I think it's probably due to the relative fire hazard of these different technologies.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense though, why?
But I don't think we wanna limit homeowners, like you were saying, with like certain battery, I don't know.
I don't think this is intended to limit homeowners. I think it's intended to limit battery energy storage projects.
Well, I agree, it's just that right now, in my reading of this, there is, it does limit them. Because it doesn't, nowhere do we call out residential.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get the intent, so if we go with 70, then is there, for the homeowner, is that, are we letting them do something dangerous? If-
I mean, it's almost like them building in a flood zone,
Yeah.
some of it's gotta be on them.
But it's
Right.
also the first responders that have to come into it.
Yeah, but did the fire chief have anything to say on this piece? No?
Here's my thought, is we go with 70, just my proposal, we eliminate all of the 6 battery options. And we just say that exceed the 70 kilowatt, have chief take a look at it and see if, we'll put it back out there, and so other people who are involved in this, I know the chairman of the select board, we get there and say, you better tell us by the first Monday or first Wednesday of whatever, we're sticking with 70. So the chief comes back and says, nah, sodium is extremely dangerous, which I'm not what I'm hearing. I mean, what I'm hearing is that it's less environment, but anyway, we go with 70 if he comes back, and then when we final review this, we come up with different ones.
I agree, I like that, I'll second that.
Well, we're not voting yet, but, so we would make that change. That vote is probably coming next meeting. Is that, everybody okay with that? And then does
Will you
that,
keep the last sentence here under 6? BESS, to read it, but,
Other
Yes.
battery technology?
Yes.
you'll keep that? Yeah,
Which,
okay.
yes,
All right.
wait, say that again?
that the best that do not
Item
exceed
6.
the thresholds, which be 70 kilowatt, are permitted by right. So what we're saying is if it's less than 70, we don't have to call it residential. They don't have to go through the rest of the things in the ordinance. But if somebody comes in with 499, that's a tier 1, and then go back to where I interrupted.
Yes.
We would decide what applies to that
To the
499.
Yep.
Do we have to bring the word residence into this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
In my opinion, but I'm
I
looking
guess
left
if
and
we're putting,
right.
if we're putting a number, I guess not. I was just thinking of the use, that's what we're,
I guess, if Get and Go wants to, since it's one of our few businesses, but if Get and Go or the Sawmill or whatever other business, an automotive, Jonathan's Automotive,
wanna put a
if
60.
they want to put 60 kilowatts in,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily, but we don't necessarily require them to meet all the site plan stuff. They want to put 499, yeah.
So you want me to lump them all together, battery technologies greater than 70 kilowatt hours?
Yeah, I would say only those that exceed
Yep.
the 70 kilowatt, and leave, as somebody said, that best does not exceed, is not.
Great, so I think the only other thing that we maybe might need to do is go again through the A through whatever and talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
Do you want me to take a crack at that?
Sure.
Just kind of look at it for the next time?
The only thing I would say is please get it to us soon enough, because we have a timing issue. And getting it back to getting it finalized, and we're running out of meeting opportunities, is my concern. So whatever we look at in February, we're gonna have to come up with a final draft to send to the select board or to send us back one. So, George, I'm fine with that, you do a great job of that. I would just say that we need to be prepared to come into that meeting, prepared to say, you know, George made these changes, are we good with them?
John,
Yes.
I have to leave in 7 minutes, just FYI.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's no problem, that is fine. Is there any other things that we need to change, that as you've gone through this, is there anything else that,
Locations of the batteries. Is that where you were going with it? No, okay.
you wanna?
I'm not looking at CZ, but, where are we saying that these are allowed? Everywhere, except for?
Currently, without contract zoning, they're allowed
Yeah.
everywhere.
Okay, so we don't want them everywhere, do we?
That's what contract zoning is about.
Right, but can we not add some of that into this, or no?
No,
Doesn't the comp plan cover that?
no.
No, I mean, that came up specific,
No.
yeah, that was a
It
question
wasn't
they
even
asked
on the
last
radar,
night.
it wasn't on the radar screen
Yeah.
in 2018.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Well,
that was asked of the attorney last night, and she said, no, you cannot, without contract zoning, you cannot restrict them, as our,
That's because currently the definition of these falls within essential services, which are
that's why,
which are
okay,
permitted everywhere,
okay.
except shoreline zoning and resource protection where they are conditional use.
Okay,
Remember the power line? They had to, for
Yeah.
those parts, they had to get conditional use.
got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
okay? Anybody else? Is there anything that we need to, that hasn't been covered, part of the comments from others, or?
I just want to touch on one thing
Sure.
that was brought up from a public comment. I think under general requirements 5.7.3, I think that's where this might apply, that we ask that the applicant proves that it complies with Maine's an act relating to energy storage, which was
Where's that at?
it's a 90-page document.
Oh,
that
no, I
was
mean,
sent
where
to
is
us.
it?
5.7.3 general requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't specifically say that here, but
Oh.
I think it's important that we do specifically say that because it was an act that the governor enacted.
Are you referencing what John sent over?
Mhm.
So that was, I don't think it's sealed yet. I think it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, I don't think, I didn't take anything he sent as, you know, all that was, this is what we'd like to do, this is what we recommend. But maybe I missed something in that discussion.
I did a quick summary of that, the whole report, and what it boiled down to is that really those are the goals. that
The
state is
recommendations and
sending.
goals, yeah, exactly.
And as part of that, then they're gonna try to work out model ordinances
Yeah.
to have local communities allow it.
Yeah, and I think John mentioned that. I think he said it might be too early at this stage to reference
It's in
that.
motion.
But
Okay.
we
But-
could in the future possibly.
Yeah, but I anticipate the push is to get this in.
Yeah.
And so they're gonna be coming at it from the standpoint of, we want these allowed. They're not gonna be looking at it like the priority is protecting your local community.
Is there a way to be proactive about that if we're going to try to push
Yeah,
this?
adopt these regulations.
Yeah.
I mean, be proactive with the act that might be forthcoming.
But the act, again, the act is to get up to, was it 200 megawatts
Yeah.
with it by 2030? And then adopt model ordinances to give to the communities so that they will be good with having that in their communities. We're ahead of that curve quite a bit.
And I think this gets us, unlike the affordable housing, we were behind, the whole state was behind the power curve on that one. We will have something, if they do mandate something, we can take a look at this and say, yeah, we're in compliance, or.
Yeah, and we
or
may
not.
have to make changes,
Yeah.
either because they come up with something better that's more protective, or they say, you cannot do this,
Requirements, yeah.
like they did with the affordable housing stuff.
And actually, if we go through CZ, can we bring that back? Or no? I can't remember. If we vote for storage to just be a contract zoning,
Mhm.
and then in the future we wanna like make it an ordinance instead, can we do that?
Well, it is an ordinance here,
The-
right, the standards.
This, are we, how do I say this?
Mhm.
Yes, the standards are, but the only way right now to, to go through would be through contract zoning.
For tier 2, basically, tier 2 and 3.
Right. Could we bring that back and say, actually, you know what, we want this to be an ordinance and you can just go through site plan review instead?
Yeah.
Oh, eliminate contract
Eliminate,
zoning?
yes,
For
you
this
could eliminate.
use.
You may be required by the state at some point.
Yeah, okay, in the future, we could change
I
that.
don't think so, but.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And I would not be in a hurry to do that because for two reasons. One is the only tool we have to control where it could have. I mean, if contract zoning gets approved, this gets approved, the contract zoning gives us the ability to say no to that site, which we don't have now. And then the other thing is, it gives us the ability to require stuff. You know, the special fire truck, the example somebody gave was whatever town that he lived in made them provide an extra long, big fire truck so that they could reach the top of the paper mill, is an example. So is there something that's gonna spray chemicals that we don't have? And not just for Best, but for other, I guess we're talking Best. So again, that's down the road, but I certainly wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, I was just, it was a
elimination.
question, sorry. Okay.
Okay.
One last comment.
Sure.
Is there any, how do people think about eliminating tier 3 altogether?
Tier 3, our size is
To
1 megawatt.
comply with the comprehensive plan. How do you all feel about just eliminating tier 3s
What
altogether?
did we say in the comp plan about it?
You're saying don't allow them,
What did we say in the comp plan?
as opposed to allowing them by contract zone?
No, I'm saying only allow tier 1 and 2.
Never allow, even for contract zoning.
So what you're saying is that we would
No,
never
no,
do
no,
anything
talking
greater
about-
than 1 megawatt.
Yeah.
That's tier 2.
And it's getting back to maintaining rural character. I could probably cite several items in the comp plan, but just throwing it out there. Only allowing tier 1 and tier 2 in town.
I will just say that I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, I think if we're going down the battery storage route, 1 megawatt isn't a lot, quite truthfully. And you all know my previous feelings about battery storage, but I think that we're not gonna get much. It's too small, I guess, is 1 megawatt, is what I'm saying.
And it'll only be allowed by contract zoning. So there's
If
another,
that
so you will be
I
looking
don't
at
want to
that.
talk about contract zoning right now.
No,
We're
no,
talking
no.
about BESS, so.
No, but that's part of it, because if they do these as a contract zone, can only do it as a contract zone, you, the planning board, will be reviewing that proposal against the comprehensive plan.
But I think
You'll
Brian's,
be able to bring up that issue of rural character, and next to the power line versus in a farm field, you'll be able to hit them with the rural character.
But it just gives us more to argue about.
yeah, but to Brian's point is, and we've talked about it, is we can't assume that contract zoning will pass.
Correct,
So, we have to have something,
but they're permitted use right now.
yes, and so if the town meeting says, nope, we don't want contract zoning, then if this passes, if neither pass, it's kind of Katie bought the door.
Then they're home free to just come to you.
But changing at this point, I wouldn't favor to something less than that. Mr. Durr, if you get
I wouldn't take tier 3 out if it were me. But
That's not the track the select board on.
yeah. So I don't know if it would get through them changing it as well. So my thought is we leave it as tier 3, leave tier 3 in there, excuse me.
And if you have enough argument about it, not wanting it, because it doesn't comply with the comprehensive plan, then presenting it to the townspeople, more than likely, would vote it down. That's my opinion.
in my challenge has always been with preserving the rural character, is why is this doesn't work but a sawmill does, or other kinds of things. I mean, it's a balance between preserving the rural character and trying to do something on the tax side and commercial side and
Economic development.
economics, I guess.
That's the highest priority to a townspeople.
So, George, I guess the question is there anything else that's one? Is there any other comments about, that was in here that we want to change? And George, are you comfortable that you know everything so that you can get it back to us and we can come in, and we'll talk about that schedule here shortly, but come in at the next meeting and take this to a vote, tweet you down.
So,
And I'm kind of looking at everybody else that,
So my only other thing, and I mentioned this last week, the 5.75I, the noise, and this could just be my misinterpretation, but the way I read it is that it allows an increase in ambient noise
good point.
by 55 decibels, not a limit of ambient noise to 55.
Thank you. So we would, limiting any increase to be, to be, we say it has to meet the standard, but then we say, but the limit, we can increase it to an additional 55. So it'd be 110.
But isn't that in our land use ordinance? This is right from our land use ordinance, so
It's
we'd have to
it's
change
written
that.
No, it's written differently. I have it pulled up. Noise limits 5.19 says the maximum permissible sound pressure level of any continuous, regular, or frequent or intermittent source of sound produced by any activity shall be limited by blah blah blah, and it lists 55 and 45.
Okay,
But the
just-
way I read this is it says an increase in
if you
ambient noise.
strike out any increase in that sentence, then I think it works.
Yes.
Yes.
That, we don't want to come in and say, hey, it's
It's
55 and we can take it to 110. Or
Yeah, exactly.
one of the requests is to
I just think it leaves wiggle room for interpretation.
Good reminder. Anything else? Because what we want to do is give George the opportunity in the next 2 weeks or whatever to clean this up and present something that we can vote on to send to the select board. Hearing nothing, George, I think you marching orders, you're good to go?
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about schedule then, coming up and what's in front of us. So, the March, I'm not sure, I turned my phone off, but what's the first Wednesday in March? Anybody know, or excuse me, February,
February, I think it's the 5th.
February's 5th, yep.
February 5th?
Yep.
So at the February 5th meeting, here's what I think we will have to do. We have a submission from Deer Creek to change two things in their existing ordinance. One is what we approved were use of sprinklers instead of a fire pond. They've come back in and said we'd like to go back to fire ponds or allow fire ponds.
Not exactly. You want to-
Please explain.
Well, there were two issues. Number one, you gave them a conditional agreement, so they didn't have to put up a performance guarantee for that 600,000 plus infrastructure. And the condition said you cannot sell any lots or get any building permits until the infrastructure is all completed. They're about 90%, 95% done, so they want to remove the restriction. So the process for doing that is they come in and they had to get an amendment to their plan to remove that note from the plan that restricts the lot sales and building permits until the infrastructure is complete. They put up a performance guarantee for the remaining amount, which is about 72,000, and then they're free to start building houses. So that's what they're coming in for.
That's one of the issues.
Well, the other issue is oversight of the consultant. They went to the fire pond. They're originally proposing sprinklers without a fire pond, and we brought up the issue that you can't do that under the ordinance. And so then they said, okay, well, we'll put in the fire pond, but we'll take out the sprinklers. And they intended to do that, but they left the note on the plan. So now they have to do both the pond and the sprinklers, which was never their intent and wasn't really what the board intent was. So they're gonna come in and amend one of the plans to take that errant note off, so they don't have to do sprinklers.
So it's kind of administrative, I guess, and Chief has confirmed, worked with them and with George.
He still needs to do the pump test on the new fitting, so they're almost there.
So I think we need that done before
Yep.
we, so they're still not quite finished, I guess. So those are the two things that we have for Deer Creek. I don't see them as being, if they get the pump test done, I don't see them as being long discussions. Obviously we've got to, they have to show us that, hey, 72,000 works, here's the engineer's estimate, and so on and so forth. But that is something, and we're gonna have to take time to review those two things and approve them. So Deer Creek is one, and that would probably be first thing on the agenda. The second thing on the agenda would be battery energy storage. The final draft that George is gonna clean up for us. So we really do, and you guys do a great job, so I don't wanna say quit slacking and make sure it's done, but we do need to come into that meeting and say, yes, what's in front of us is good to go, send it to the select board. We've already done that with resource protection. The third thing is, as George was mentioning, we don't have a lot of time, but last night, if you have not had a chance to watch it, please watch the select board discussion on contract zoning. So the attorney did, I think, probably a little more in-depth presentation to them, particularly as the chairperson was asking a lot of questions. So there was a lot, and then they went through paragraph by paragraph to say, this is what it means. They then turned around and said, and I thought they were gonna take this to public hearing level. They then turned around and said, okay, now the planning board's gonna pick it up.
Right.
So that what that means is, we have to have, in my opinion, we have to have, like we did tonight, a public information piece to that, would be in the March 5th meeting. We would, so that the public can comment on it. They're not gonna get a lot of
The February 5th.
February, damn it. February 5th meeting. So if I talk about the next meeting, it's February 5th. But the February 5th meeting, we'd have a public, then we do like we did today. We would put something together that could go back to the select board and say, this is what we recommend you put on the warrant. So that's kind of, there's BES, there's contract zoning. So then the next thing is, George, could you tell us where we are and the expectation on the historical? You don't need to go into what the
Yep.
changes are,
Yep.
but what's happening with that? Because this is a potentially fourth thing we have to accomplish.
Okay, so going back, I've been working on that for 3 years now. And I had made recommendations, provided a report that basically call for an overhaul of the historic preservation regulations of Durham, which are really geared toward communities like Topsom and Castine, which have historic districts. Durham doesn't really have anything that qualifies as a historic district. Not enough buildings in a compact area. And so I had made a series of recommendations. The Historic District Commission wanted to take a different approach, and they wanted to just refine some of the language to clear it up, but basically maintain the same system. And so the select board back in November, December, asked the town attorney to look at the two proposals and then make her recommendation. She has now done an analysis and determined that the current system does not comply with state law or federal law and needs to be changed. And so she has come up with a series of recommendations. She's going to be presenting a draft of her ordinance changes to the select board on January 28th. And so, as I explained to John earlier tonight, basically the select board has taken on the contract zoning and historic preservation regulation changes.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna come on board and say
Yep.
they've taken on part of it. And because my initial thought was, and the way we discussed it, was they were gonna do it all. And they would give us what was gonna go before that. They're taking on the initial piece, as they've done with contract zoning, but then we pick it up and I had not planned on us doing public hearing or a public information meeting and really doing that kind of stuff. So I will say, yes, they've taken it on.
But that's
to a
where,
piece.
that's where I'm going.
Okay,
Is
go
that
ahead, go.
So the select board has taken the lead, and they've had all their meetings publicized and everything. So my take on the situation is the select board is simply passing on the contract zoning and the historic preservation, once they finalize it with the attorney's recommendations, they will then pass it on to you to do the formal public hearing, not to go through a public participation process. There's no time for public participation process. So, as I said, you did your public participation process on Beth's. It was very extensive, similar to what we've always done. But on these two issues, because of the moratorium, there hasn't really been the time to do what we always do, spend a whole year on something like this. So they want to get those two pieces ready for the April town meeting. So I don't think you should feel like you need to do a public participation process on either of these. And I don't think they're expecting you to do that.
I would like to clarify that, because,
Yep.
you know, I took away something different listening to it on TV. And maybe when they talked about public meeting, I took as information, they, you know, for instance, what they're giving us on contract zoning is what,
Yep.
you know, it's not the actual warrant, which we get for the formal public hearing. We would get, you know, because we went through this at the special town meeting, what they gave was confusing to people. And so what we're gonna hold at the public hearing.
Yeah.
and
So what I
guess-
suggest you do is get in touch with Joe Roy and
I'll do
ask for clarification of what their expectation of
I
you're
will do
supposed to
that.
do. I think the intent is what I just described. You may be thinking, no, they're expecting you to now start a whole process. I don't think that's the case.
And I don't, yeah, I wanna be clear that not start from scratch as we did with Bess. But my question is, you've never really had public input on either one of these.
In the way that you do it.
The way, yeah, as they're doing it. So, in the last, so the question would be, we'll take contract zoning. Should we hold a public information meeting where people can comment on it? And however we do it, it's scrunched down a lot. But I am concerned that you present something that the town has had no input on. And they haven't. If we say, okay, look at, you know, we're just gonna schedule a public hearing on that, you know, could lead to issues. I remember when my first public meeting, we scrunched, what was it, backlots or something, where they had a public hearing, no previous input, whatever, and went to the town and crashed and burned. And it wasn't necessarily bad what they did. I think the town just said, first we're hearing of it, you know, or I guess there was a formal
There
public
wasn't
hearing.
enough transparency.
Yes,
in
and
the
so if that's what they're gonna tell us, and I'll talk to Joe, I'm not saying that's what they are. But my recommendation to him will be, like it or not, I think you need to have the opportunity for public input
process.
on contracts on, because that's a new alien, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but the vast majority of the town has no idea what that is. So, you know, we have that public information meeting, a little quick presentation for it, and then we, basically at that one, I think we can say, hey, we're okay with what they provided us for contracts, so they being the select board.
Yep.
And, you know, if there's a good idea that
And
comes
I
out.
think Julia gave you out those copies of this.
She did.
Okay.
So please look at that, and I'll ask him, or Joe, do you just want to take us to take that and go straight to a public hearing? Public meeting,
Yep.
public hearing, a formal public, so, but then the same thing is, with historic district.
Right.
You know, and I think as much transparency as we can get on both of these is necessary.
Yeah.
So, but if they come to, hey, planning board, take this on the 28th of January, which they may, that means we have to look at it on February 5th, so that we can then we'll have to schedule formal public hearings on resource protection, battery energy storage, contract zoning, and historic district. So sometime in the month of March, we have to have four formal public hearings.
Or have one public hearing.
Or, yeah, I mean, we have to, yeah, but it's, okay, we're done with RP, so can we knock it out in one meeting or two? That'll be challenging to do that, if there's a lot of discussion about any of those.
What I think you could do is schedule one, but give enough time that if you need to continue it, because there's so much public input coming in, you could then continue it to the following week.
Yes, I mean, we can always count on conservation coming in and coming up with good ideas, but these
Well, but
other,
again, at that point, you can't make changes.
you have the public hearing, yes, but
In March, you cannot make
we
public,
cannot,
make changes.
but if you remember, even last year with solar, it was probably an hour plus, because a lot of people still wanted to make we still have to let them make comments.
Yes, and if
So,
you need to, you can continue.
We could, so I guess my point is, we're probably gonna have 4 topics that are gonna have to, they're gonna require a public hearing, and that has to happen between, I don't know, with no more than 30 and no less than 7. So basically the month of March. And I don't know if our March 5th meeting falls in that window, because I don't know what the April town meeting is. Point is, so that's what next meeting, we're gonna do Deer Creek, we're gonna vote on Bess, we're gonna do something based upon the discussion I had with Joe, and then on our contract zoning, and then whatever they give us, and we won't get the historic district till the 29th of January. So it's only a few working days before the 5th of February.
April 5th is the town meeting.
And April 5th is that the town meeting?
Yep.
So is the 5th of March,
Should work.
within 30 days?
It is.
It is.
31 days.
Oh, was it 31?
Nice, thanks.
March has 31 days, so.
Yeah, don't ask me, because I can't remember what month we're going into, so.
it'll be just, it'll take more than 30 days.
Yeah, depending on what
So
you
then we'll have
get
to have a second
going,
meeting in March.
you may have applications come in
Brought
that
this
you need
guy.
to deal
Well,
with.
that's the other piece of the pie.
So, the second Monday in February, second Wednesday. And
In
then if
March.
you need to continue March, then you need to, you could go another week.
Yeah, I think so we probably need to take a look at, on March 5th, February 5th, what days work in March for us?
Yep.
For public hearings. So 12th, 19th, 12th is the primary, we didn't finish, we'll go on the 19th. So I guess those are the kinds of things we need to be prepared for at the next meeting.
I appreciate you bringing up the historic district stuff, because that was on my list of things, but I don't want to be squozened for time, I know that it was something we were, tasked to do, but I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I know there have been
There've been
public,
drafts and drafts. No, I think that's I think, but basically, contract zoning is one thing in terms of, do we have some public input? And then say, this is what, select board, this is what we recommended. Because I think they need to provide it to us in warrant language. That's contract zoning. But you're right, I mean, I think based on getting it on the 29th of January, the best we're gonna accomplish on the 5th of February is, we're gonna have a public I guess we can put out information on it. And this is what the select board gave us, folks.
So, if you want to, you're gonna take public comment on contract zoning, right?
Yes.
You can also take comment on historic at that.
I think that's what I'm saying, is that we would have to, and then we'd have to, but I think a discussion about rewriting either one of them, quite truthfully, we're probably not gonna get there. So whatever they give us for, historic district or
Yeah, and what
contract.
you will do for both, any public input you take on February 5th on historic, and any comments that you have can be communicated to the select
Yes.
board, and they finalize it
Yes.
anyway.
And they are generally at those meetings, and I will recommend to Joe that they, they're working hard, this isn't a slam.
But the thing is, they're in budget now,
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Big
Yeah,
time.
yeah, it's so.
which is, I think, part of the reason why they passed this off on to you.
Yeah,
can we get any kind of summary of where we are with the
yeah,
historic stuff?
yeah, well, those aren't the same day. Yeah, no.
I'm sorry, I just haven't gone to all the public meetings.
The select board has been dealing with the historic district.
I already put those on my calendar.
Any,
Is contract zoning gonna affect solar too?
Yes, I think that, in the sense that, we haven't really talked about, there is a table of use out there on which things will
Did you get
require.
No, but I wonder what the threshold is, and none of that's been discussed.
Well, that's part of it is part of the discussion we need to have when we get contract zoning, is what should be the solar threshold?
Right.
What it does do is for, and I know it's getting late, so but what it does do is it gives, conservation has been working on where should solar go? What contract zoning will say, this is where we don't want it to go.
Right, no, it's a really, I think, a useful asset, but I think the devil's in, you know, how big a solar.
Well, I think people need to come on the 5th of February and say,
All right, I'll be there.
yeah, it should be, you know, the public comment piece, it should be, and Juliet, I think, brought that up last night, but it should be 10 acres, 20 acres, or 1 acre, whatever I think right now we're using megahertz, or
1
megawatts, I'm
megawatt.
sorry, thank you. So, yes, so is that, what do we want to have for, I mean, when I think of the acreage size, 20 acres, that's my parcel.
Yeah.
That could be, that's big to me.
It is, but most commercial solar farms that's small.
Yeah.
That's the minimum, that's where they start.
Yeah.
They go from 20 up to hundreds.
And so if you use contract zoning, you could put in extra buffering and some other stuff.
Yeah.
What I think it prevents is the issue Green had, where they came in and said, you see these 600 acres, we want that to be solar farms.
Yeah.
The town could easily say, we're not, may or may not, but we're not gonna go with 600 acres.
Yeah.
So-
It'd be a great tax base, millions of dollars.
Which
I mean,
depreciates.
there's a one in Farmington that's 500 acres, and they said over the lifetime, there's gonna be 17 million. in state-
They are potential, so I do need, I'm sorry, I do need a motion to close.
So moved.
Seconded,
Second.
raise your hand, unanimous. Mike, we should have let you vote on closing it out. Thank you for your input,
Sure, I'll be there in a bit.
please. And then,
No, it's just for us to review. I will not be here on February 5th.
comments you got, please.
Is this different than the digital?
If it's family, that's,
No, it's more. The sheriff said I had to be somewhere.